Hello, and welcome back. So this morning at Also Digital has really been about talks. Now we're kind of like moving forward to a slightly different atmosphere and attitude in the afternoon at Also Festival. And this segment through the afternoon is really all about ideas around kind of workshops and craft and really getting involved. But you know, we wouldn't be Also if we didn't have a massively big idea talk in there as well. So I'm so pleased to be here. It's our final kind of like talk session with me of today with Lauren Bravo. Lauren's work is enormous. I mean, we've had huge ideas this morning. This is probably one of the biggest that we have all weekend, and that's to really look at our relationship with fashion and clothes. And it's a much bigger challenge and issue than perhaps any of us realised. Certainly, I realised until working with Lauren earlier this year. For those of you who don't know Lauren or her work, she's a journalist and an author. She writes for Stylist, Refinery 29, The Guardian, and she also wrote this incredible book, How to Break Up with Fast Fashion. It's absolutely brilliant. We'll send it to you. It's on sale in our bookshop, so we will get that to you if you want it. It's superb, and it really is absolutely full of ideas for how to keep your relationship going with clothes, or to change your relationship with clothes, but without destroying the fashion industry. So we really want to make sure that we're all, you know, Lauren describes herself as a fashion addict. You know, we all love clothes also, don't we? And we want to have a good relationship with fashion and clothes, and we want to support fashion industry. We don't want it to disappear. So it's a difficult problem, and I'm so glad that I've got Lauren here today to help us understand it further. Hello, Lauren.
Hi, Helen. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. How is your lockdown?
It's been okay, yeah. Can't complain, I think is the mantra that most of us are sticking to. Could be worse. Going a little bit stir crazy now. Haven't got too much to do. I have become a full lockdown cliche. So banana bread up to my eyes in it. You know, I'm regrowing spring onions on my windowsill. All of that. But yeah, it could definitely be worse. It's all right.
And it sounds a bit of an odd question, but what have you been wearing during lockdown?
No, it's a good question, because I think everybody has been taking different routes on this, and I wasn't really sure which way I would go until it happened. Obviously, none of us were. This is the most dressed up I have been all pandemic. For you, I've put my enormous, ridiculous vintage sleeves on. I've been trying to challenge myself to nail something that I've never really been that comfortable before with, which is casual dressing. So I am quite a maximalist. I'm always either a little bit overdressed or in pajamas. I don't have a lot of an in between. So I've just been wearing a lot of like shirts, trousers, kind of. I've got a very comfy pair of like velvet needle cord flares that I've been living in, because you know, jeans around the sort of tummy when you're lounging around all day is not what you want really. But I have also been pushing myself a little bit to wear things in my wardrobe that deserve a bit more love, that I may be a bit self-conscious in. So I've got a pair of velvet dungarees that I have been styling up and sort of forcing myself to like get a bit more comfy in, so that hopefully, you know, when normal life resumes, I will have lots more outfit ideas.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, it's superb. You know, one of the kind of subtitle of your book is a guilt-free guide to changing the way you shop. And one of the things I found after we did our session together earlier in the year, which I absolutely loved, and it totally changed my approach to clothes, which is really important for reasons that we'll understand. But you know, we know a lot of people in fashion also. We're really committed to fashion. We love people who love clothes. And your book is not about taking away the fun of fashion or upsetting the industry in ways that would make it disappear. You want fashion to exist. I just want to make that clear.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love fashion and I think I always will. And particularly clothes, I think it's interesting making that distinction, isn't it? Between fashion is maybe more problematic because it suggests that it's something that kind of comes and goes, you know, trends are very fickle and transient. But loving clothes and loving getting dressed up and the sort of power that an outfit can have to communicate, to kind of define yourself, they are, you know, they're sort of a language. When, you know, they speak without words in a way, our clothes. So yeah, I never wanted the book to be damning at all, or particularly not to make women feel kind of silly or frivolous for loving fashion, because that's something that just really gets my goat. And I think that women are given a hard time about so many things, but particularly this idea that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You know, we're expected to care about clothes. Women buy so many more clothes than men do. The pressure is really on us, but at the same time, we're made to feel a bit silly and trivial if we kind of indulge that. So I wanted the book to be something that really celebrated a love of clothes and the power that they can have. And on the business side of things as well, you know, small businesses making clothes can be a brilliant opportunity for people to earn a living and be creative. And, you know, whole industries can be built in a way that is sustainable and ethical. So, yeah, meant to be a guilt-free guide, definitely. It's got to be something that celebrates what fashion could be, I guess, rather than telling people that they are bad for buying into it.
And it, you know, and it's not trivial and it's not silly for reasons I think we're going to go into now. You know, we're planning to do a session. We're going to do it in a later year now, which was about, you know, the kind of biggest threats to the planet. And an author that we were working with had written 10 of the biggest threats to the planet, and number 7 was fashion. And, you know, which really does kind of like bring it sharply into focus. And, you know, and I had no idea until I read your book that textile production, which is a broad term, but still, you know, textile production produces 1.2 billion tons of CO2 per year, more than flights and all of maritime shipping combined.
Yeah, it's pretty hefty, right? And I mean, I was shocked by that. You know, when I first learned that statistic, I couldn't quite get my head around it. And I think, yeah, the public is only really just kind of waking up to this stuff, because for years, the narrative around climate change has been about carbon emissions, like driving, flying, plastic. Obviously, a few years ago, everybody suddenly became much more aware of plastic waste and single-use plastic. And fashion has sort of flown under the radar, I think. You know, it was quite easy to think, well, how could my clothes really be causing that many problems? But of course, the problem with fashion is it's hugely you know, sort of wasteful and resource intensive at source when it's being made, the way that crops are grown, the way that factories operate. But then you've got the problem of what happens to the clothes after we finish using them. And that's a whole issue in itself. So yeah, it's pretty vast. I mean, some people say it's the second most damaging industry. Like, there's a lot of different stats kind of whizzing around, no one's quite sure, but it's definitely up there. Yeah,
It's difficult. And, you know, and it does seem that, you know, I think, you know, the generations between us, clothes has really changed, fashion has really changed. You know, I think what has really crept in over the last 10 years is this kind of lower prices of clothes and relentless pace of the amount of clothes coming back. And I just wondered if you could speak to, you know, how and why have clothes, fashion become, you know, fast moving consumer good, like like a can of Coke or you know, anything that you'd buy in a supermarket.
I mean, that is exactly it. You know, I have this quote in the intro to the book, which is about, it's from an old ad exec in the 30s saying that marketing needed to turn the goods that we use and buy and invest in, like cars and once upon a time clothes, into something that we use up, like biscuits, toothpaste, shampoo. And that has happened with fashion. So it's a relatively new thing, fast fashion. You know, only about 30 years ago, 90% of the clothes sold in the UK were still made here, I think. Don't quote me on that, but it was something like that. And, you know, people did spend more on clothes. They were something that you had to sort of save up for. I've got this comparison in the book about my mum and I, and how in the 70s she had a Saturday job and she would earn about £5 a week. And if she wanted to buy herself a dress from like a high street shop, she remembered it costing about £16.99. And so that would be nearly a month's wages that she would save up for one dress. When I had a Saturday job in the mid-noughties, I earned about £50 a week and I could still buy a dress for £16.99. So that just really neatly shows you the way that clothing, unlike almost everything else has, you know, prices have gone up, properties sky high. Fashion has done the opposite, and it's become cheaper and cheaper as globalization and the sort of offshoring of production to developing countries like Bangladesh and China and Indonesia has, you know, it's made it a very, very competitive market, to the point where brands are only prepared to accept, you know, absolute rock bottom prices, and factories are forced to exploit their workers essentially in order to meet that demand. there's this expression that they use in the sustainable fashion world, which is chasing the cheapest needle around the world. So what happens is obviously that if a factory says, well, look, we can't make those clothes for that price, you have to pay us more, that business will just get moved to the next factory or the next country. And it's also, I mean, so we think about it in terms of the British high street. What has happened is this sort of very chicken and egg situation whereby, because clothes have become cheaper, customers are able to buy more of them and more often. So the brands keep pumping them out at a faster rate. And because those clothes are hitting the shop floor much, much faster than they ever did before, we now have almost 50 seasons a year rather than 4 seasons a year. It kind of creates that psychological effect whereby we think that it's normal to be buying clothes at that pace. We've all done it. Like, I used to go out on, in a day kind of feeling a bit uncomfortable with something I was wearing, and my brain would go, well, you can just nip into H&M at lunchtime and buy a new outfit. And that the ability to do that, it really characterises fast fashion, that idea that clothes have become something quite throwaway.
And I think you really capture both sides of it, and we will talk a bit about the real journey and cost of your clothes, how hard that is to keep in your mind when you're buying them, because you are being sold to so relentlessly. And also there's another psychological element, which is, there's a reason why I'm wearing this dress. This dress is from Zara. And the story of this dress is, last time I interviewed Lauren, I had bought a sustainable jumpsuit from a British company, and I was proudly going to wear it. And then I got the fear that morning that I wasn't going to look good enough and that I wouldn't be confident enough to wear it. So I ran into Zara and I bought this dress, and I wore it to interview you, and it did make me feel better. So we are all terrible people.
No, not terrible. We are victims of marketing, essentially. I mean, these fashion brands have £1 million marketing budgets. They are spending so much to make us believe that we are only as good as our last outfit, and to reinforce that sort of craving for novelty, and that feeling that we have to be constantly replacing, upgrading our wardrobe. And I've been there. Like, I still, I may be kind of clean, but I still kind of get those urges, that sort of desire to buy something new every time I feel a bit sad or a bit insecure or even happy. I used to shop because I was celebrating something. And I think, so many of us have kind of internalized that message that shopping is the answer for almost every emotion, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there are some studies that say that it does actually add to your confidence, wearing something new quite significantly.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say, one of the things I found out from you and also in your book was, okay, you've bought it, so commit to wear it 30 times. And I think this is one of the ideas. If you are going to buy something that is fast fashion, then you have to commit to wearing it 30 times. And I wondered if you could tell us about that initiative.
So the 30 wears rule was kind of developed by Livia Firth from EcoAge, brilliant website all about sustainability. And it's really simple. It's just this idea that when you're buying something, you ask yourself, will I wear this 30 times? And 30, it's an arbitrary figure, but it's quite a good sort of benchmark for how much wear we really should get from an item of clothing. And so, you ask yourself, will I wear this 30 times? If the answer is honestly probably not, then maybe you don't buy that thing. And I also use it when things are in my wardrobe. I sort of try and count up how many times I'm wearing something, try and get to the magic number of 30. And sometimes it won't be 30 in a year or 5 years. Sometimes it's a thing that you keep in your wardrobe for decades, and you only wear it every so often because it's quite special, or it's a bit fancy for everyday life. But it's just that sense of commitment. It's that idea that I always say, you wouldn't buy a house plant with absolutely no intention of watering it. You wouldn't kind of get a pet with no intention to sort of feed it and look after it. And I know that's a bit glib, but, there is an argument to be made for kind of making sure that when we buy anything, when we bring anything into our lives, we are at least prepared to commit to it for the foreseeable future until it isn't fit for purpose anymore. And I also use 30 wears when I'm doing a wardrobe clear out, which is something I've been doing quite a lot of recently. I've had, the time on my hands. So I go back and I look at things and I think, did I wear this 30 times? And if not, there are normally some lessons to be learned. So you can normally think, okay, well, maybe that's because actually this colour, I don't really think it suits me, or this fabric never feels good when I'm wearing it, or I bought this for a life that I don't lead. So yeah, 30, it's a good number to have in your head.
It's a great thing to do, and obviously last time I saw you I was just embarking on it, and having done it, and for all of the things you just explained, it's really useful. The other thing I hadn't realized is just how much you realize the quality of the things that you're buying and how longevity isn't built into them, and you begin to feel different even if you still love it as much as when you bought it, which you won't. There's this idea of like, why am I buying something that can't last 30 times? It's just such a good idea. So so fashion is a lovely area. We've been talking about lots of different areas this morning, and I really think this is one of the few areas where we as a consumer, as a buyer, have a lot of power. Is it as easy as buying a little bit less, thinking a little bit more and buying a little bit less? Is that the solution?
I think it can be. I think that one of the things I was really careful to do in the book is make it clear that there are so many different ways to do this. There's not all kind of one size fits all solution, because everybody has got different attitudes, different lives, different personal style, different budgets, different bodies. And so for some people, the answer absolutely will be buying a few really well-made items, maybe spending a bit more on them, buying something that is, good quality, that will last, and that you can wear again and again and again and feel really happy and comfortable in. That is not going to be the solution for everybody, myself included, because I know that I am a bit of a magpie. I know that I am quite fickle. I sort of I'm a bit of a costume dresser almost. I want to dress up as a different person each day. I'm like, who do I want to be today? And I'm never going to be one of those women that can have a wardrobe full of like immaculately cut white shirts and one trench coat. I'm not French, basically. I'm never going to be French. And so there are lots of different ways of doing it. So one of the things that I embrace a lot myself and I talk about in the book is obviously buying secondhand. So secondhand is one of the best solutions we have, because not only are you're not fueling that industry, you're not kind of creating that demand for more and more fast fashion to be pumped out. You're also giving a home to something that otherwise might end up either in landfill or having to be kind of processed by various charities, or even sent overseas, where there is quite a big problem with our secondhand donations kind of stifling local economies in countries like Uganda. So buying secondhand, it's kind of a win-win, all round. And often it means you can end up with something better quality than you might have been able to afford new. So, you can find those kind of designer labels that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to buy brand new, but you can get them off eBay. Maybe they've barely been worn. Charity shops, obviously, I'm a massive fan of. But then there are other solutions as well. So secondhand isn't the ideal, it's not perfect for everybody. It takes a bit of time, it's a little bit labour intensive. You've got to go and trawl through vintage shops, or at the moment trawl the internet. Sizing is quite hard with secondhand as well. It is a lot harder to find plus sizes secondhand. So there are lots of other ways. Swapping clothes is something that I believe wholeheartedly we all need to do a lot more of. Sharing things with friends. I kind of believe that no one should ever have to buy a nonsensical item for a wedding ever again, like tiny clutch bags, pastel blazers, things that you buy for one particular outfit for one particular day, and then you're not going to wear them again. We all need to get a bit better at asking to borrow things off people. There are lots of great kind of apps and companies coming through now that are formalizing that. So a bit like sort of Airbnb for clothes, where you can list things you have and people can borrow them or buy them off you or rent them. So yeah, there's lots and lots of different ways to be more sustainable with our wardrobes. But I would say the most important thing and the first step for most people is about learning to love what you've already got. And once you sort of get over that hurdle of getting bored of things really quickly and maybe pick up a few more sort of styling tips and tricks, then it does become a lot easier to stop shopping as much.
I love how you've gone for. I know you're a massive vintage second-hand fan. You make it look so easy, and we will unpack, why some of us might be a bit more resistant to that than you. Why that takes some thinking about. But I don't want to leave the high street just yet. I know you want us to, but it's too hard. It's so convenient. And so I just wanted to ask you, about the high street. How do we find out who is the best? Not of a bad bunch. Who are making efforts to be more sustainable? Who should we be supporting if we're going to buy new?
Yeah, I think this is one of the best things people can do as well, is just get a little bit more educated, because actually there are massive differences between a lot of those high street brands. So one of the tools that I really love is called the Good On You directory. There's a brilliant website called Good On You. I think the web address is goodonyou.eco. And they are fantastic. They really kind of take the time to dig into so many brands. They have thousands, I think, in this directory. And they're also really good for writing very kind of no-nonsense articles about different fabrics and things like that. So if you're ever thinking like, what about bamboo? And is linen as good as they say it is? Then I would recommend go to Good On You. And yeah, the directory, so they rate every brand that they cover. I think there's about 5 different ratings, from avoid, not good enough, it's a start, good, and excellent. And it's surprising. I know that when we last spoke back in February, we had quite a lot of fun, didn't we, going through and looking up people's favourite brands and actually kind of reeling at some of the results. So you find that brands like Primark, kind of famously often used as a bit of a poster child for the worst of the fashion industry, they actually score higher than brands like Anthropologie, Warehouse, their Ghost, things like that, Whistles, even, a lot of those kind of mid-range brands that are a bit fancier. We kind of convince ourselves that because we're spending more money on them, they're automatically going to be more ethical, more sustainable, better quality. Sometimes that's true, but actually a lot of the time it isn't at all. So it's a real eye-opener. So I really recommend spend some time on the Good On You directory, type it all in. They have an app as well, so that's quite useful when, eventually when we're all back outside shopping, so that you can just quickly kind of check things. There's also Fashion Revolution, incredible organisation who started in 2013 after the horrific collapse in Bangladesh of the Rana Plaza factory. And they have really kind of led the way on so much of the sustainable fashion conversation. And they publish every year their Fashion Transparency Index, which is, I think it was 250 brands this year that it covered. And it was, they look at transparency as their metric, which it's really important to note does not necessarily mean a brand is more sustainable. But often there is a big correlation between how much a brand tells us, whether they publish their factories, whether they talk about how much they pay their workers, whether we know about where the fabric is grown, things like that. And, the ethics and sustainability and whether we should be buying from them. So that's another really good resource that I would recommend having a look at. But of course it is tricky because this year H&M came out top of the Fashion Transparency Index. And a lot of, sustainable fashion advocates had a lot to say about that, because H&M do a lot of good stuff, but at the same time, they are a big part of the problem, because they kind of they produce sheer volumes of clothes that are never, there are never going to be enough people to buy them and wear them. And they have been guilty in the past of promising a lot of things that they then don't deliver. So it can be tricky. I mean, I still struggle to get my head around it. I say in the book that trying to dress more sustainably feels a little bit like that lateral thinking problem where you're trying to get a fox and a chicken and a bag of grain across a river, and every time you think you have a solution, someone else pops up and says, oh no, but actually that's problematic because of this. So I think try and, read as much as you can, take the time to sort of find out, but ultimately don't beat yourself up, because trying to do things better and be a bit more informed is a massive first step. And if everybody did that, then we probably wouldn't need to worry as much, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's what's so brilliant about the Good on You website, and someone's posted that up, and also the fashion transparency, because as you're saying, there is no perfect solution. The perfect solution is that we don't buy any more clothes, but we want the fashion industry to survive. We want to be able to enjoy it. We want it to be as sustainable as it possibly can be. So we're looking for lots of initiatives, and I think you are absolutely right. There is no one answer, but Good on You is a fantastic place to start, as is the fashion transparency. But it takes effort. However, I did it following our session, and it just became very clear. These are my best bets. If I'm looking at an array of shops and I've got to buy something, that is my best bet, because I can see it's taking steps to where we want to go. And what's really interesting, when you mentioned Primark, not being as bad as some other mid-range stores, but this also is the same with high-end, really high-end fashion brands. You can't just, you can't just say, right, I will just spend money on the best kind of like the best brands there are, because they're just as bad.
That's it. I mean, I've lost count the number of times that people have said to me, when I've done radio interviews and stuff, and they've often said, but surely the answer is just spending more money on clothes, which that's all very good if you've got the money, but a lot of us don't. And, the answer to the sustainability problem should never be that it's something that only kind of a rich elite are able to do. Of course it shouldn't. And also, it's not true. So a lot of those very high-end premium brands are the absolute worst when it comes to opaque practices, basically. Often they don't reveal anything about where their clothes are made. We had the big case a few years ago where Burberry were found to have incinerated £28.6 million worth of stock.
To stop it going out into them, because they didn't want it out.
Yeah, basically because they just didn't like the idea of it being discounted, and people, tarnishing the Burberry brand by wearing it, who weren't perhaps as kind of aspirational as they would like. So there's a lot of shady behaviour that goes on all across the industry. It is much more, I think, about thinking, who do you want to support? And brands don't have to be perfect before we buy from them, but we want to just believe that our money is going to sort of a brand that is at least trying to do the right thing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that. And you said earlier on, when you were talking about options for what to do with our clothes, that clothes recycling wasn't necessarily the answer, and that in your mind there's always a kind of better place for use. Oh no, you said that clothes recycling is the answer. There's always a better place for used clothes than the bin.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, landfill obviously is a massive problem, and so I think it's 300,000 tons of clothes just in the UK alone every year. People just put in the bin, which I think I was quite shocked by. But so it's about always trying to find a new home for your clothes, kind of, even if it's passing them on to somebody else or donating them, or cutting them up and using them as like cleaning rags, turning them into scrunchies. My mum wraps all her presents now in beautiful fabric rather than using wrapping paper. Getting a bit creative, I think, with what you do with those clothes. But obviously the first thing we should all be trying to do is actually get some more wear out of them.
Because it said like something like that 23% of clothes in our wardrobe are unworn.
So that was a big study that Trade did a few years ago, and they found out, I think that was London. I think maybe Londoners are probably a bit worse than the rest of the country, myself included. But 23% of clothes in our wardrobe are completely unworn. And so there's a lot to be said, I think, just for kind of having a bit of a dressing up session. This is where the fun bit starts, when you decide to make that break, is really sort of like getting all of your clothes out, rediscovering the thrill of when you were 15 and you used to sort of spend an evening just putting together outfits, and finding new ways to breathe novelty into what's already in your wardrobe.
This is a thing, isn't it, Lauren? This is a thing. And Pauline and I, after we did our session together, we worked this out. So you have to get everything out of your wardrobe and really look at it again. And you can have some real fun with it. And we've all got time to do this. And the real idea is that you kind of forge a new relationship with old clothes. Is that right? By many means necessary.
Yeah, definitely. And you'd be surprised how often you think you need to buy something new because there's a trend that's come along and you want to buy into it. And then actually you discover you've got something in your wardrobe that's basically the same. You know, fashion, we know this, fashion comes around again and again and again. And often it will be something that maybe you haven't worn for a few years because you got a bit bored of it, or you didn't have the right skirt to go with it or whatever. And then you'll go back to it and think, oh, okay, well, actually, I've got that skirt I bought 6 months ago. That will look good with this. And maybe I can layer it up with this belt, this jumper. And, you know, suddenly it feels fresh again. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in that sort of. And this is why when I do a big wardrobe clear out, I don't necessarily get rid of that much stuff. I think you should only get rid of things if they really don't fit you, you know, or they make you feel horrible every time you wear them. But if it's something that you're just a little bit bored of, or maybe it's a little bit out of fashion at the moment, hang on to it if you can, because things come round again so quickly.
And also, you really keen on encouraging people to have a go at altering them and turning them into something that they might enjoy wearing, or that can get close to something they want to wear, especially if it's only once that you need it.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is one of the epiphanies that I had when I stopped shopping, was realizing that actually I'm not auditioning for clothes. It's the other way around. Clothes should be auditioning for us. And there's something, I think a lot of us, perhaps if we're a little bit insecure, particularly about our bodies, we start to believe that when we put something on and it doesn't look the way we want it to, that it's our fault and we have somehow let down fashion. And actually, it should be completely the other way around. We should be making clothes work harder for us. You know, clothes they should last longer, they should wear better, they should wash better. But also, there's no harm in forcing clothes to look the way you want them to. So I totally believe, you know, whether it's taking something up a couple of inches, changing a neckline. I mean, like, this has got ridiculous shoulder pads in it, but a lot of vintage, you don't want the shoulder pads. You know, you don't want to look like you're Joan Collins in Dynasty.
Why not?
Take them out, you know. Adding little poppers in. I've got a popper in this one. You know, if you're a bit busty and things gape where the buttons are, actually taking the time just to kind of sew in little hooks and eyes. Or, I mean, I'm very lazy. You know, I don't even have a sewing machine at the moment. I do it by hand, or I use things like Wonderweb, which you can just kind of iron on yourself. Very quick and cheaty, and it doesn't look perfect if anybody looks really close up, but nobody looks. As long as it looks good enough for you, then that's enough. And I do think that when you've taken a little bit of time as well to really sort of invest in a piece, you are more likely to love it and keep it for longer. Yeah.
And this is your central point is really, you know, kind of like, yes, there are options for buying. Yes, there are options for disposing. Yes, you can share. Yes, you can swap. But, you know, it really is any idea that can keep your clothes in circulation is a good one. And any way that you can get to really love your piece and keep wearing it and keep wearing the items in your wardrobe is a good thing all round.
Yeah.
I've got a question. We've got a couple of questions actually. Jemima says she's heard that buying 6 pieces of clothing is sustainable in itself, and she has a kind of bet with her friend that they only buy 6 new items from the high street.
Oh wow! Is that in a year?
In a year, sorry, yeah, in a year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a great way to do it. Like, it's funny, isn't it? Everyone is different. And I think some people respond really well to having absolute rules and challenges. And I know that I do. I mean, part of what inspired this book was I gave up buying brand new clothes for a year.
A whole year.
Other people I think are different, and they don't respond as well to that. And as soon as you kind of give yourself a hard and fast rule, then you just want to kick against it. And I think for those people, it can be interesting to say, yeah, something like 6 items, that's a brilliant place to start, I think, because it makes you think really carefully about what those 6 items are. You want to buy things that work well with everything else in your wardrobe. You're going to look after them a bit better. You're going to kind of, appreciate them for longer because they're all you've got. And I think that makes sense. My mother has a rule, which is whenever you buy anything, you always have to ask yourself, what 3 things that are already in my wardrobe will I wear with it? So no buying something that you then don't have anything to go with, because we've all been there. And also name 3 occasions that you're going to wear this to.
Real occasions, not made up ones.
Occasions, yes. Not fake invitations to ambassadors' balls that you're hoping might arrive. So yeah, I think there's all kinds of different fun challenges you can set yourself, and I think doing it with a friend is a really good idea as well, because it does spur you on, and it means there's somebody that you can message when you're having one of those low days where you're like, I just want to throw all my money at Zara. So yeah, big fan of that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we've got a question from Jim Smith. Jim, hello, how are you? He says, and I get what he's saying, but it's interesting to see what you say. He says buying zero is even more sustainable.
Absolutely. If you can buy zero, Jim, then absolutely good for you. And you know what? Like, no disrespect, but it is very interesting. The only people that ever say that to me or suggest that it's very easy to buy nothing at all are men. And it does go back to what I was saying before, which is that women as a whole, you know, this is a generalization, but often women are socialized to feel like our appearance is the most important thing about us, and therefore we do hinge a lot of our self-esteem and our identity on what we wear and the way that we look. And so I think it is a much harder challenge. Like, my boyfriend has one pair of jeans that he wears until they fall apart, a couple of jumpers, a couple of pairs of shoes. He's happy, and I admire that. But at the same time, clothes are, you know, they're sort of the way that I celebrate and communicate who I am. So I think it's just a very different personal thing. But also, I would say, if you're going to buy secondhand and you're going to buy things from charity shops, then you could argue that's even more ethical, because you are saving those clothes from landfill, you're donating to a charity, you're fueling a small independent business. Everybody's got to find their own way. But I think if you can give up for a year and buy nothing at all, then that's a brilliant thing to do. So
yeah, I think it's a really way to kind of reset your approach to it. But Jim, you could go charity shopping. You could have a whole new, express all different sides of your creativity by buying different clothes there. Let's talk about sustainable fashion, because it gets a bad rap, but it's no longer all about sexless hemp overalls, is it?
No, this was definitely a preconception that I had, even as recently as a couple of years ago. I never felt like I really belonged in the sustainable fashion world. And I think that was because my main image of sustainable fashion was kind of art school, conceptual, a bit hippie, maybe quite a lot of shades of beige, you know, a lot of sort of shapeless smock dresses and sort of very utilitarian, thick fabrics. And I also kind of thought that you had to have a very specific kind of body and aesthetic to wear it. So often kind of quite high-end sustainable brands only go up to a size 14, and, you know, they don't really take into consideration that people need to wear bras and things like that. That has thankfully changed a lot, very quickly, and is continuing to change. So we are seeing a real rise in brilliant small independent sustainable brands that are catering for all different kinds of styles, different people, different bodies, different budgets as well, because there is often this idea that buying sustainable clothes means it has to be expensive. And of course, there is an argument to say that, well, clothes should cost more than the kind of fast fashion end of the high street. But that doesn't mean that you have to be paying £500 for a dress. You know, that's nonsense. And of course, we know that the vast majority of people can't afford to do that. So, yeah, it's great. We are starting to see more kind of creative, flamboyant, sustainable clothes. We're seeing great designers who are making things from vintage dead stock fabric, and also who are doing things like making things to measure and to order. So it means there's no waste. You know, they're not creating hundreds of garments and then hoping someone buys them. They're waiting for that order to come in and then making it specifically for you. And that's brilliant, because it means that you get something that fits you perfectly. It means it challenges customers as well to think, okay, if I'm going to have to maybe wait 3 weeks or 6 weeks for this dress to arrive, am I prepared to do that? And if you're not, then you probably don't want it enough. And it means that there's no wastage. So the designers can, you know, just buy the fabric they need. They're not kind of ending up with loads of end of season stuff at the end of every season that they have to then sell on cheaply or get rid of. So yeah, there's a lot. Do you want me to name some?
Which I was just going to say, your book is absolutely full of brands that you can get involved with, and yes, do. I used a lot of them after our our session and completely changed what I'm buying. Please do.
Oh, amazing. Well, I mean, there's even more I've discovered since I wrote the book. You know, this is the trouble with writing something so timely, is as soon as you've handed in the final draft, you then think, oh God, I could have included that as well. The go-to brand that I always talk about, because I just think they're brilliant, is Birdsong London. So they have a wonderful ethos. They're very feminist. All of their workers are either elderly people who do all the knitting at sort of community centre groups, or migrant women who are sort of learning really important skills so that they can support their families. And everyone is paid a living wage. They're all treated really brilliantly. They are really size inclusive. They do made to order. They're just great, and I love their stuff. There's a designer called Mary Benson, who I'm obsessed with at the moment. She makes the most gorgeous dresses with stars and moons and things all over them, and amazing kind of statement sleeves, and totally the antithesis to the shapeless beige hemp smock dress. Megan Crosby is really brilliant as well. So she makes very gorgeous, very affordable clothes out of dead stock fabric. And again, they're all made to order. There are some brilliant websites. There's one called Gather and See, which is lots and lots of different sustainable brands. They kind of bring them all together. There's Maya Miko, which they make stunning clothes, and it's all women in Malawi making it with mainly local fabrics. And, you know, it's, again, we kind of tend to get swayed by this idea that made in Britain is automatically the best. And actually, it isn't always. You know, there have been cases of British factories really mistreating their workers, paying them poverty wages, while actually you can support developing economies in other countries in a really sustainable and ethical way. So, yeah. God, there's so many I could keep rattling off.
It's honestly so good, and it really, it really does change your way of thinking. And someone said, "Oh, the fashion conversation really needs to change in the light of climate emergency," and it does. You absolutely have to stop buying the way that we have, and really, really change to ways of buying from people who are creating their own sustainable businesses. Like you say, dead stock fabric. I've bought some pants from people using kind of like sort of fabrics that would be thrown away otherwise, dresses that have bought that that you just don't know about them. And it really is through people like you, who are communicators, that you can find out about all these people that are there and want to work with you and have no damaging effects through their work. You joked a bit about wanting a free public lending library which would exist for wedding outfits. Yeah. But it is really interesting, this whole idea of micro needs, when people have a micro need for fashion, and this is when a lot of purchases are made, things that are worn so rarely that end up in the wardrobe unworn. And do you really think that fashion subscription is going to be the future? And how could that look, as a final question?
I think it will be one of the futures, if that's not too evasive. I think that there is definitely a growing market for subscription services, for rental, for kind of peer-to-peer lending apps and things like that. And I think that for a lot of people, particularly fashion junkies, people who really still want that thrill of something new in their wardrobe, I think that is a brilliant solution. I think it won't be the right thing for everybody. And also, I think I would really like to see a little bit more diversification in terms of those brands and startups, because what we've seen up to now mostly is brands that are catering for, by and large, the same kind of people. So they are often still quite expensive to sort of take part in, even though they are more sustainable, you are often paying kind of as much to rent a dress for a weekend as you might to buy one in Zara. So I think we need to see them become a bit more inclusive, a little bit cheaper, and also clothes that are a bit more everyday, so many kind of rental and subscription brands are mainly catering for, like I said, weddings and occasions, and they're kind of gorgeous dresses, but actually what we need to see is kind of people lending out jeans and jumpers, and once we get into the habit of kind of thinking that maybe you could buy something like that that's still a bit of a fashion item and wear it for 3 months and send it back. And there are also, of course, a few question marks. So one of them is, what happens to those clothes when they are not fashionable anymore? If we're talking about rental being a way for people to get that trend fix, then what happens next year when nobody wants to rent those very trendy items anymore? Do they then get sold on? Are they then going to end up kind of unloved in the back of a wardrobe somewhere? and also things like dry cleaning. So Rent the Runway, which is the biggest rental brand in the US, they have supposedly the biggest dry cleaning bill in the world. And so, you know, there's still, like I was saying before, there are no perfect silver bullet solutions. But what I really believe is that actually we each just have to find our own way, you know, plough our own furrow. And that way we could kind of work towards a much more sustainable future. So the answer is never going to be everybody doing one thing. It's going to be everybody doing lots of different things. And gradually all together we will cut back on our consumption that way.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. I think that's a perfect place to end. And I just want to say thank you so much for your book, because I think it's really easy to not grapple with clothes as a big issue. It's even harder to know what to do about it and to not just turn your back on it and just say, you know, oh, that's just part of my life, or I enjoy it. And there does seem to be a real fight between people who think, oh, it's just not important, let's not worry about it, and the fact that it is so polluting, it needs our attention. And to write a book that's so helpful, so warm, so witty, and so full of ideas that we can take into our own life is the whole point I set up Salon. And, you know, I worked with you in January. I've read your book. I've taken it into my life, your ideas, and I've changed my approach and I've changed my thinking. And I'm really grateful to you.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to hear that.
Hooray! It's so important. And I hope we get to do it in real life. I know we were planning to do a big clothes swap as part of our physical festival.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm sure we will at some point in some time. And thank you very much, and I hope to see you very soon. Thank you, Lauren.
See you soon. Take care, Helen. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much for being part of our Big Talks, series here at Digital also. There are lots of workshops going on. You've got your forest bathing if you want to go out for a walk, or if you're not able to go out, you can listen to the Chris Watson soundscape and do it yourself. There is a beatboxing workshop with Flexi. He's absolutely extraordinary. Do see him if you can. Yodomo, the incredible initiative from Sophie Rochester, which is all about real excellent skills in making, is very kindly running, I think, 3 or 4 workshops for us over the afternoon. Please jump on one of those. An extraordinary way to learn a really new skill from an expert. And then, of course, we are all, I hope, coming together, the big community of Also Festival together for lip sync battles. It's always a huge highlight of the physical festival with Juliet. We are doing it tonight. Come and be part of it. I'm sure it'll be brilliant fun. I'm very much looking forward to it. And I think that's all from me right now. Thank you so much for being part of my part of Also, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you've missed the talks or you want to catch up with any of them or see them again, they are on the Also player, so do go back and see any that you might like to, and you can do that all weekend. This salon is now closed.